we're live. Hello, everyone. Can you drop where you are from now in the chat so that you can know that we are having people from everywhere joining us today? So, first of all, welcome everyone to our second workshop on the solution design series. In today's workshop, we're going to help you and your team to figure out how to brainstorm effectively. And if you have been here last time, you may remember some of us who we are, but I can see that some people are probably new and you were not here last time. So let's give a quick intros again. So first of all, my name is Evelyn Lee. I'm the DSC lead at UT Dallas. Alex is not here with us today, but let's welcome Erin.
Hi guys, I'm Erin. I'm the DSC lead from Mount San Antonio College. Nice to see you all here.
Awesome. And we also have Lee Yun here with us.
Hello, everyone. I'm a Lee Yun, and I'm a DSC lead at Portland State University. And welcome to this workshop.
Awesome. And yes, you probably be familiar with Danny. Hi, Danny.
Howdy, y'all. Good to see everyone again. Thank you so much for joining. We also have Madusha Correa joining us. Say hi, Madusha.
Hey everyone.
Hi, Madusha.
How's it going?
Beautiful
be
day.
here.
Perfect.
Looking forward to your upcoming chat in just a second. So we'll bring you back up in just a minute.
Awesome. Thank you, Danny, for introducing Madusha. And here's our today goals. So first of all, we're gonna have some kind of like here's some story from Madusha to get some kind of like vision and strategy for your own solutions. And after today's workshop, you're gonna understand like how to leverage the design sprint to use it to brainstorm with your team and to leverage it to design your solutions. And after all, you will be able to conduct a productive brainstorming sessions. So for our today's agenda, first of all, that's going to be the story from Madusha. That is the title of it. You all can see that. And after that, we're going to go to what is design sprint. And after that, we're going to have Erin and me talk about how you can help and define problem. So remember, in our first workshop, you already start like identify what kind of like problem you want to touch on, how you can start from there, how you do the market research user. In today's workshop, we're going to dive deeper into that to start like laying out how you can ideate solution from understanding your problem thoroughly. And then we're going to have the group activities where you're going to be randomized into a group of 4, and Danny's going to tell you more details on how you can be assigned to breakout group later on. And then after that, we're going to have 5-minute break. We're going to go back to the second half of the workshop with sketch and decide. This is the fun part where you can actually sketch with your team in the group activity number 2. All right, so let's welcome back Madusha and Danny. Hi, Madusha.
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, yeah.
Danny, I think you muted again.
Sorry about that, y'all. Yeah, thanks for bringing us back up, Evelyn. Really excited to hear a little bit more from Madusha. With that, we'll see you in like 15 minutes.
See ya.
So I only get 15 minutes, eh? I might go a little lower, so I'm just going to give you all a heads up.
That's totally fine. This is going to be a really awesome story, and I'm looking forward to it. With that, let me go ahead and pull up your presentation, Madusha, and the floor is yours.
And by the way, don't mind the background. I'm hiding in a basement right now because I couldn't find a better internet connection, so bear with me. Danny, okay, so I'm going to quickly switch to my slides. 1 second. And we should be fine. Okay, so before I jump into the presentation, I want to give you a quick overview. This presentation I haven't touched in about 10 years. And I was trying to say, okay, maybe I should have optimized it. But then I said, you know what, I'm going to keep it the same way I did it about 10 years ago. And I want to point out everything I did wrong. So if you saw the topic, the heading, obviously I'm going to censor myself. The heading was how I messed up my first startup. Obviously I've done tons of projects before, but this is kind of I learned a lot. So to add some context, I just like you all just graduated from school, very ambitious. There's a lot going on. Went to business school and listened to everything they had to say. and then went to the real world, and it hit me really hard. And I think there's some things that you all can learn as well. So the startup was called Synux. And I had a co-founder at the time, and we were building applications, and we came up with this concept called Delio. So it was like a slang, what's the Delio? So we thought, hey, wouldn't all these restaurants that are putting up their daily specials on chalkboards, can we put that on a digital platform? And that was the concept. So you see a BlackBerry right and center right now. If you don't know what a BlackBerry is, it used to be the most predominant smartphone platform at the time. And I used to work for BlackBerry, and then we were building applications for BlackBerry. And we had a utility application that my co-founder built at the time, had about 2.5 million downloads. And we were like, oh yeah, we good. We got our systems together, everything. And on the background, you'll see like the iPhone and then the Android phone as well. Now, funny story about this design. I did this design. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm a mechanical engineer. Went to business school after that. I went on YouTube, figured out how to do all this, and found templates and put it all together. And then we got invited to do this presentation to this organization. It really, this is an organization you probably know really well, but I'll reveal who it is later down towards the end of the presentation. So the concept was the businesses can connect with their customers, and now they can drive them, because unless the chalkboard or the display that they put on screen is not being displayed, they're not going to be getting attention. Now, again, this design, I did it, and you see the screenshot of the website. I did that too. So I figured out how to do WordPress, and I went through all these different templates, and I taught myself all that. And we built this MVP, and it was working really well. So this is like another fancy display thing. So restaurant specials, deals, drinks, all that jazz. The app user has. So as you can see, I know this picture is really corny. Looking back, this is what business school does to you, right? It makes you wear a vest and then look busy with the phone on. And that was my co-founder at the time. So as I said, we had a decent number of traffic, not with this app, with other utility apps. And we want to put this platform in the middle of all this. We were known as the Harold and Kumar of the startup space in Kitchener-Waterloo at the time. For those who know what this movie is, as a reference. So, okay. So again, I'm going back to the design. This is what I presented to this company. Location-based, daily, blah, 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 all this business school nonsense, highlighting how easy this platform is. And I've seen some of your presentations coming through, some of your workshops, and I noticed that you are following this trend. So yeah, user experience, blah, blah, blah. This is how it would look like once you go into an individual business, how the stuff will be presented. And now, so for example, if the business owner can't do it, or enter that deal into the system, you can be a vigilante and you can do it on behalf of them. And then it's a gamified, so you get some discounts on top of that. So at the time, Groupon was kicking off, right? So Groupon was kicking off. For those who don't know what Groupon is, you can put a special out there, and you can set a minimum number of orders. So for example, a burger for $5, only if 100 people order it. So that means they created this group, the demand a business would want before committing to fulfilling that order. Whereas we made it more flexible. So because there was a lot of pressure on the businesses who create this, because they had to pay a fee for Groupon, they had to allocate so many resources, but then the customer loyalty after that wasn't there. But our system was a little bit different. So it's, again, very corny graphics here, but that was the concept that we were pushing forward. So we had all the proper branding and everything. So now I'm just going to go through the background of it. So if you read some of these words, I can't believe I even bold some of these, power of conversation, and all this mission statement nonsense. I blame business school again. Was on our pitch deck. And then, yeah, so I'm not going to go through all this. It's really embarrassing to look back at it. So target industry. But the good thing I saw here was we did some interesting, what do I call it? Research on how much the margins are. So the restaurant industry was struggling even back then. Like the profit margin was only like 4.7%, close to 5%. So which is not good, right? If they get hit by, let's say, like COVID is worse. Like even if the oil prices go up, that can fluctuate, and a lot of the businesses tend to feel the pinch. So we wanted to give them more opportunities to do. So if there's one slide I would like you to focus on is how much research we did on the market side, but we made a huge mistake with all that, which I'm going to get to it later. Okay, so again, consumer spending, research. So how do we partner up? What kind of partnerships did we create? So Food Bank, for example, we were pushing to get a partnership with them. So so they can promote their stuff here, and then people can drop things off. Again, since it's food related. And Connects Club was this initiative set up by my old roommate in Hong Kong. So we created the same platform for them. We had about, 30, 40 different customers who want to test it out. So again, Delio will talk to web, mobile, third-party apps, integrations, all that. Again, it's more nonsense trying to explain to them what we're trying to do. Here's the organization we pitched it to. So as I said, you probably know them really well. So our goal was we were selected out of all these hundreds of startups to go up to Google and present this to them. And I bombed this pitch. I really did. For a number of reasons. Obviously, as you saw, I did a lot of market research on everything, but we never talked about the customer. We never talked about the fact that we talked to any of the customers, and we didn't really do much of that work. And then the biggest issue we had was when I talked to some of the restaurants, they're like, I don't have time to do any of this. This is a great idea, but like I'm busy running my restaurant. At the time, natural language processing and none of that was available to get some of those. So for example, if you wrote something down on a chalkboard, I can take a snapshot today and that picture will automatically be uploaded and converted into text and updated. We didn't have any other systems back then, and we were pushing to get Google featured on Google Maps. So when you look at a restaurant, it'll show what that daily special and it's going to be coming from Delio. That was a huge mistake, and they pointed out. And then the other thing was that day, I remember it was September 26th. That's the day I had to go to my old manager's funeral. He died of cancer. This guy was like 60 something years old. I remember even when we were working, he was like the funniest guy. He goes snowboarding, windsurfing, very active and very competitive even with this. And I was kind of like upset the whole day because I got to go see him, to go to his funeral. And in my head, I was like, I hope it's not open casket. The whole day was going on. Now I'm in Google. There's free food. People are talking all this stuff, trying to pitch this thing. And my mind wasn't in the right space. So, those things happen, unfortunately, but yeah, something to share. So that's the end of the first presentation. By the way, Danny, I do have another one I want to jump into, but before I get into that, so there's a lot of things I learned. I guess I can jump into discussion with you on this if you want to pop back on. The biggest thing, anything that you want to understand is graphics, visuals, how cool things look, or how cool you think things would look is great, but you still need to go talk to the proper customers in the first place. Make sure that what you're building, what you're mapping out, what you put into place makes sense. And then make sure there's no technical debt. So for example, we built the platform for BlackBerry first, and BlackBerry died very fast. We didn't invest into iOS. We didn't invest into Android. We could have done it, but we didn't do much with it. And then the WordPress platform I created, I remember December 20th, it got hacked. And I was pulling my hair out because now all these other customers who signed up messaging me going, what the hell, why am I getting spammed? And then I couldn't. So yeah, so now if I were you, for example, if I had DSC, if I understood what what the resources are available, I would have doubled down more on what that would look like, and end up building it different. But interestingly enough, out of all this, there's another idea that came to me, and I've been waiting for somebody to do it, but nobody has done it. So I'm going to do it myself probably in another 12 months. I get some time. For 10 years, like nobody hasn't figured this out, and this has to do with minimum wage. This has to do with service workers, and this has to do with social media and what this the demographic is going to do. So I'll keep you posted on that. I'm happy to take any questions, but I don't know how you all want to jump onto this. I'll let you curate the questions, Danny.
Yeah, sounds good. So we do have a couple questions. I'll go ahead and pull up the first one now. So
Yeah.
it's yes.
Why did the app fail? Right. The biggest thing about this, and I think, and I see Len's popping up too. So I'm going to refresh his a conversation we had with him a little earlier. When you build platforms like this, marketplaces, you have the chicken and egg problem. You need to attract either the chicken or the egg to get the other half. So, for example, for us, we had to attract the businesses, and the businesses didn't see the value with our users. So, when you build marketplaces like this, you're always going to run into it. So, the best thing to do is, if you are a restaurant owner and if you build this your own customer base and the other ones find out, that's the best case, because now you have some traction from both sides. You have a system in place for them to optimize it, and now you can run with it. That was a big issue, and we would like focus on the tech, how polished it should look like. Sometimes we engineers have this tendency to make sure things look and feel good before we even test things out. If I had to do this again, I would have done it a lot different. I wouldn't even build an app. It can be like a quick a Twitter bot or a Dialogflow bot put together. Hey, I'm going here. What do you think? Is there any discounts in this place or something around that line? So there are a lot of reasons it failed. We over-engineered. We focused more on the looks and feels of it. We didn't talk to the customers before, and marketplaces are tough overall.
And that's one of the things for y'all on the live stream. I want to make sure you heard that, right? Like, Madhusha didn't focus on the users, right? So as you're approaching your solution challenges, remember what we discussed in our first event, right? You want to keep the end users in mind, and really don't lose sight of solving their problem, right? There's tons of things we can do, but keeping the users at the end in mind is always necessary. I actually had a question for you, Madhusha. I dropped it in the chat, but I'll bring it up here. So how did you conduct your research? And is there any resources you use that you really enjoyed? I know some of us on the call may have not done such extensive research before. So just any pro tips you may have.
So here's the thing. When you look at any industry, there are certain arms that regulate it. So for example, restaurants, there's a regulation arm that maintains it. And the way they do it is they have memberships, and then they collect data, and then they support some of those reports. So for example, when the government comes and say, how much should we tax, let's say, a restaurant owner on XYZ, they're the ones who advise them, or they're the ones who lobby them. Right. So every industry, especially in North America, and then developed countries, tend to have this, and they have a lot of those research available. Now, you need to take the research with a grain of salt. That means take what they give you, like, for example, the numbers we showed, the margins we showed, and talk to some of the businesses and see whether that's what they go through. Right. So, for example, when you look at restaurant industry, there are like high-end ones. There's mom and pop shops. There's like pizza places. They work really different. So if a pizza place, they are always like, I mean, the margins are very tight, but the volumes are pretty high. It's not a secret sauce. There's no real like crazy sauce you need to put into it. As long as the customers base that they're targeting are students and regular people, it all works out. So start with those organizations, and then you can work your way back. But again, like, add some common sense to it. Make sure it works with your demographic. So that's a great place to start. And this is all available online.
Thank you so much for that, Madhusha. I'm sure some students are going to really take that to heart. And if you don't, well, you should rewind this video and listen to it again. Maybe you'll pick it up that second time. We do have another question here, which I think would be really cool to answer. So what are some of the things you would recommend for reaching out to organizations, businesses, maybe nonprofits, etc.?
Mhm.
Is there anything you did to kind of get them to respond to you, at least for that initial consultation, right?
It's really tough because we did it backwards, right? We built it and they were like, "Oh, this is great," but I mean, they had to allocate time to it. So one hack we did was I scraped the yellow pages. I figured out how to do it with Python at the time, and I scraped everything, the locations, all the logos, and all that. And I built this whole database of like 1,000 restaurants. So when they look at the app, they're like, "Oh, these guys are on it." I didn't say yes or no, but I'm like, "Hey, you could be on it. We already created a profile for you, complimentary. You can put your stuff in here." The best way to do it is, again, if you work with one, and if you can solve the problem and show value to one business, then it's easier to sell to another business. So focus on the value, not necessarily what your idea is. So that's what I guess, if we had to do something different, that would have been one. So for example, if I was able to attract, let's say there was one restaurant, we put the daily specials, but then I went and showed it to Blackberry's building number 7 workers who never even knew about these restaurants, and we got some traffic to come there, and I was able to verify that. And then they were like, "Oh, okay, cool, this opened up another." It stretched my reach by, let's say, 2 kilometers or something like that. Now then you can use that and go work for another one, because the word gets out in some of those spaces, some of those industries that you work at. So that's a great way to do it. My friend, one of my friends, laid it down the road. And by the way, I ended up joining this incubator, and I was helping some of these startups with founders with their ideas. He noticed when he was at his friend's uncle's restaurant. Uncle calls the supplier and leaving a voice message. And when he asked why, he said, "Oh, this is how you order from the suppliers. You got to leave a message: 50 kilograms of potatoes, 30 kilos of onions, and all that." And he was blown away. And then he did some research and found out this is how it's been done all these years. So he ended up building a platform for his uncle's friend restaurant. And then it just went and the suppliers saw this and they loved it, and it just snowballed from there. Now they're, I think, I don't know, 60, 70 people work there, and they raised about $50 million. So yeah.
No, that's really amazing. We do have one more question here from Aaron, and then this will be the last question before we kind of go back. But this is a good question from Aaron. If the app succeeded, what would have been your next step, right? How would you have kept it around?
Yeah. So, for example, I mean, you got to take into consideration as to what Yelp was doing, right? Then what Google ended up doing. So, if we were successful, I think Yelp or Google would have. The goal was, that's why I went to Google and pitched it, to say, "Hey, we can do all this grunt work and get all this data to you. Let's make a deal." Now it complements your user experience. So when a customer goes to Google a restaurant, they know the rating, the location, and they know the daily specials and things like that. So we had that system. We started building the relationship. Now with your, I guess, scale and the resources, we can expand it further. Now, fingers like optimistically, the best case scenario would have been an acquisition that was like great way to exit it. Other than it would have been very competitive later down the road, knowing what Yelp was doing, knowing what Google was doing, and all these other tools that they were building that was far more sophisticated than what we had in mind. So that would have been a great way to get out of it.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for all of y'all who dropped questions in the chat for Madusha. Also, thank you, Madusha, for such an amazing talk. I don't know about y'all on the live stream, but I certainly learned a lot. Doesn't make me happy to say I learned from your failure, but
so that's a good thing you brought up. You don't learn anything from successes. Trust me, you don't, because everybody's gonna clap, everybody's gonna high five you. You really don't know what happens, and at the end of the day, that's why a lot of these ideas that try to scale don't scale. And people I work with that I'm trying to help out even now is like, okay, you had this many successes at certain times of your life, but you can't scale it to the next level. So the challenge with the incubator I was working at was we had all these $1 million successes. How do you build a $100 million company? How do you build $1 billion company? So there's a lot you need to learn to get to that. So failure is always a good way to learn. So
Yeah, and one of the things that's really important is to learn with every step you take. I know I've learned a few things from this chat. Hopefully, y'all did as well. If there's any other questions, for Madhusha, drop it in the chat. We'll connect them to Madhusha later. But let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us, Madhusha.
So I guess. So by the way, I thought I'm gonna get like half an hour. So I had a second slide deck that I never touched for 7 years, which I'll do it in another time. So that'll show you how to present better, how to position better, attention span when it comes to investors and things like that. So happy to come back, happy to talk to you all, and you know how to find me. And send me a message, and more than happy to collaborate on future events.
Thanks so much, Maverick. Let's go ahead and bring up Evelyn, and we'll get back to our agenda.
Hi, thank you for bringing me back, and thank you, Madhusha, for sharing such, I would say, painful experience, but it's also very insightful for us to learn from like yours experience, what you've gone through, and how you've like draw from like that experience with like your failure in your startup. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Not a problem.
And yes, and for our next part of this workshop, we're gonna move into what is the design sprint. So the design sprint is a tool for your team to like solve problem through designing, prototyping, and testing idea with users. So you all heard about the story with Madhusha, right? We need to bring the user to be like the center of our problem solving process. So you and your team will use this design sprint to kind of like build a shared understanding of the problem space that you are trying to solve and develop your solution around the user with minimal risk and investment. So how exactly does it work? So most of the product teams have to go through this cycle. So you can see that you're gonna learn some, like ideas. You got some problems to see, and you got some ideas to try to solve it. You build the product, build your idea solutions, and then you go through like the whole launching and putting in the hands of user, and then you learn again from the user and how they're using the product, and on and on and on. It's kind of like an iterative cycle, right? And most of the time, this is incredibly time-consuming and expensive process. Most of the time, money is concentrated in the build and launch phase. So what if we could just shorten the cycle into something like this? So you got the problem, you kind of ideate the solution on that, and you test the solution that out before you actually build it, and learn from the like the mistake and what kind of like things you can improve on that ideas. Go back, add some more, ideate again, build up like new idea upon the old one, and then keep moving on with that until you find an idea that you find is like kind of like user centered and it actually work. Then that is the time when you start building and launching it, because it's going to save you a lot of time and money if you not build the wrong product from the beginning, right? So with the design sprint, it follows 6 phases. The first one is understand. The second one is define. So there's this 2 phase where you try to understand the problem space that you're trying to get, and define what kind of like goals and what kind of like resource that you have. The third and the fourth one is the most like I would say interesting part, where you actually sketch the idea on the paper, and you will start deciding which kind of like ideas you want to pursue, which direction you want to develop the solution. And then for the last 2 phase, you're going to prototype your ideas and test it out with users. For today's workshop, because of the constraint of the time, we're going to focus on the first 4 phase, not the last 2. We're going to come back to the last 2 in our next workshop, but for today, we're just focusing on the first 4 one. And if you was with her like in our first workshop, you probably already start with the first 2 phases already, where you start like kind of narrowing down the scope of the problem you want to solve, and you start doing some market or user research, where you actually learn knowledge and insight from the market and the problem that you're trying to solve. So, yep. And for today's workshop, the design sprint, you can totally check it out on our official's website for the solution challenge. And you can see here where how to access it. And this is a QR code where you can scan it right now. But I would say this session is going to be recorded. So let's do it later and just come back later and scan it and make sure to check it out after this workshop. All right. Okay, so for our first two steps is to understand and define. Erin, can you go back on the stage with us? Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Okay, Erin, so what does it mean to understand and define in the design sprint?
Glad you asked, Evelyn. So, as you mentioned, the first phase of the design sprint is to understand your problem. At this phase, you and your team want to build a shared understanding of the problem at hand that you're working with. In our last session, we covered how to define our market and conduct user research for it. These are the first steps to gather information about the problem space that we're trying to tackle. However, these methods mentioned are only methods to gather user input about the problem. And so, what exactly do we do with the output? This is what we're trying to tackle when we talk about understanding and defining. Let's take a look at an example. From our last workshop, one of the good examples I mentioned was the carbon footstep calculator. And so let's say you and your team are working on that project. Your team figures they should send out a survey as a way to analyze what potential users have to say about the community's efforts to improve sustainability. The first question you ask is, which field do you think we need to improve sustainability in? And so we have the agricultural sector, the automotive industry, waste management industry, and the electric power industry. A little side note here for the survey. Your team decides to make the survey easy to fill out for the average user, where almost all of the questions are multiple choice. This is good practice, as you want to get as many responses as possible from your community. And so these are our results. As you can see, the waste management sector was the top choice in your community, while the agricultural sector was the second top choice, then the automotive industry, and then electric power industry. As you can see here, these two industries, waste management and agriculture, was the top two. These are two separate industries, but let's analyze it. In agriculture, or in the agricultural sector, a lot of waste was produced in manufacturing crops and pesticides. As we can see, the agricultural industry caused more weight on the waste management industry, indicating a causation between the two industries. But looking at the other industries, all of their processes and methods caused weight for the waste management industry to handle. But though the waste industry seems to be causing the most carbon pollution, it seems that all the other industries surveyed also contributes to a correlation in the increase of carbon pollution.
Um,
So,
yeah, just a quick question because, like, like in our last workshop, there was a student who brought up this very, like, I think a very interesting question that when you got, like the result of the surveying is usually not this kind of like obvious, usually like everyone pick everything is kind of like look at the same thing. So how do you deal with that when you have not kind of like obvious result from like the input that you got?
yeah, so looking at survey data that might be multiple times the size of this sample survey can be difficult. And surveying can also produce multiple different responses from your community. But I'd say it's still manageable. You will most likely have top choices in your survey results and can analyze your results from there.
Yeah,
To,
thank you.
yeah.
Awesome.
And so, to help with analyzation in general, make sure to analyze what exactly is shared between responses. Is there a story that multiple data points tell to cause this top response or these top responses? You always want to analyze the causation versus correlation in your surveys, as we did in the last example, where the agricultural industry caused the waste management industry a little more weight, as well as the other industries. But in general, they all caused an increase in carbon footprint. The other thing we don't want to do is to not cross off or to cross off something possibly significant. Even if a data point was not a top response, it may contribute to the story the problem is trying to tell. For example, the automotive industry we saw was one of the lower choices. And this may be because it's been an increase in EVs. However, the automotive industry is still a main contributor to carbon pollution.
Yeah, I totally agree that the data sometimes can be really messy that you mentioned, and it's really important to, like kind of look like what kind of part and share between the response. And also just to highlight for everyone who is watching, one of the earlier point that Erin mentioned is that try to, like kind of like phrasing your question in a way that keep your data kind of like clean, I would say. So for example, like in the first example that Erin mentioned, right? If you ask still like people to type in what kind of like thing that you think that would make the most waste, and each of people type a different thing, probably it's just the same thing, but each people can type different ways in it, and it's be really hard for you to kind of like analyze the data later. So just kind of think ahead of what kind of data you are looking for. It could be like it could be put into something like multiple choice because it'd be easier for you to kind of like visualize it later, or is this something like you want some kind of qualitative one so people can elaborate on that and you can look deeper into the insight? So that I think is very worth to note it down.
Yeah, definitely agree. Make your surveys like keep it simple, as might be a common engineering phrase. But anyways, and so this example, how can we even apply it to the first phase of the design sprint? And how can we look at the problem effectively? A method to capture this underlying problem based on your input is by using the how might we method. One thing to start off when you're using this method is to think all or most complaints are opportunities. The most frustrated person or opinion in the room is an opportunity for you to build a solution to solve it. But how might we is like a fractured sentence. And so what does that actually mean? How means to think outside the valley. The answer is always out there, even if no one or not many people have solved it. But again, you might be the first person to solve it or improve it in a way. The might portion is that your answer may or may not work, and that's completely fine. You still get skills and knowledge from it, and you still get a learning experience of the product development process. As we saw in Madhusha's last talk, he definitely learned a lot from the process, even if his startup failed. Lastly, the we part. Everyone owns a solution, and it's not just you. It's not just your teammate. Important teams' decisions should always be decided together, no matter what, to keep you and your team informed about everything that's happening within the design process. So the second method you should use is the model canvas. The model canvas is how you can look at your solution instead of the problem once you figured out the problem. Since you have limited resources and time for your project, you would want to consider the big picture of the problem and the solution. After thinking about your problem, you would want to start by listing out what resources do we have? What can you offer with your product or project? Who can support you? Is there a community that you could go to for mentorship? And how can you maintain the solution in the long term? Let's take a look. So thinking about what resources you have the Google developer tools that your DSC is here to help you find and get access to these tools to build your project. What can you offer exactly? Well, think about it. What does your product serve to do? Make it appealing for potential investors, let's say, as if you were on Shark Tank. Like, for example, the carbon footprint calculator. It's an incentive for companies to be more conscious about their actions affecting the environment. That's maybe a plus to some investors. and who can support you. Of course, if you're in here, you're probably part of the DSC community. And your DSC is not only a network limited to your club, but also to your community and even other clubs like what we have here. And lastly, thinking about how you can maintain the solution in the long term is not something that you might have to do immediately, but it's a good way to think about your revenue and your resources or your sources of revenue that you might get from your product. But after all this, let's start thinking about brainstorming. And so I'll pass it off to Evelyn.
Thank you, Erin. And yes, please remember, like in this two first phase, you would want to focus on, like how you can start kind of opening up your option with these problems. So you want to start like, how might we, right? Don't limit yourself in anything. Just start ideating. Just start, like flowing out all of the ideas that you got, and then let's see like how we can move from there. And then after you got all the idea on the table, right, you will want to like start looking into like what kind of resource and what kind of like constraint that you have with the ideas. So that's gonna be better for you to have like more options. So that also like one of the first thing about like like brainstorming, right? The creative process itself contain like kind of like multiple cycles of iterations. So the first way you want to kind of diverge it, so that is when you create more choice for your own. So you have the problem you want to solve, you want to start looking at it by multiple perspectives. So how it affect like business, how it affects like people who use it, or how it affect like some kind of like specific kind of like factors in the environment or something like that. So just try to look into it in different way. Open up all your choice to tackle it. And then after you got all the idea laying out, right, and you start picking out like which one you think could be fit into your resource and time limited, and you start picking out all of those stuff, and from then you again open it up with all the choice of how you can solve it, what kind of technology, what kind of skills that you got in your hand available to you, or you may want to pick it up. And then you start picking out again, like, okay, from those technologies, those skills, the resource, the budget, what can I utilize? What is the best for me? So that is a kind of thing that's gonna like keep going like a cycle, and you would want to keep going on with that. You don't want to limit yourself from the beginning, and you don't want to end yourself with too much option. And one of the things with brainstorming is that is just some quick rule for you so that you can brainstorm it effectively. First of all, don't judge, okay? Go for quantities. Every ideas count. Even like you want to encourage the widest ideas you can have. Go crazy. Of course, it should be like, like not too irrelevant or too broad. Like Erin mentioned in our last workshop, let's just stay focused and aligned, okay? Make sure everyone understand what you are talking about. Try just have one conversation at a time and get all of your teammates to be aligned with what you are, kind of like going in your conversations. The best way to do that is try to visualize your ideas. So you want to make sure that if you are talking about one problem, other students have to share the same context that you are talking about. Just don't let them, leave them behind and still thinking about one of the previous idea that you would mention about, and then it come to like the point in the conversations where you talk about two different things without knowing it, and that's not like a good way to brainstorm. Just keep everyone focused in a line. And lastly, why you want to, want for quantities and stay focused is because you want to build upon each other ideas. That is the best result coming out from this, right? You don't want to just like, okay, I got one idea, two idea, I will just pick one and pick two. No, you want to, kind of like pick out the best thing out of them and then merge them into like a better one, build upon each other. So that's going to be the best outcome. All right. So I would want to invite Danny back to the stage to kind of like walk people through on how we gonna go with the breakout group and our first group activities.
But before we have to go into our breakout activity, it looks like we have a question from the chat.
Oh, yes.
And so the question was, should the survey be in the form of objective questions? Because designing the questions sometimes shape the output. Well, I'd say the survey should be a couple of objective questions, as your survey should be use to collect relevant data to achieve the objective of your problem, or rather see what exactly the problem is. I'd say a lot of the questions should be objective, yes, but you should also give the user maybe an option to rate, like how much has, let's say, pollution affected your community, kind of thing, and then you give the user like an option to rate, or even an option to comment if they want to.
Yeah, I would want to like kind of like add on to that is like like because we want to the reason why we want to do the survey thing and we want to do some kind of like understanding is because like we want to get the sense of what our user want. We don't want to end up designing the solution for ourselves, right? We want to understand like what the user actually needs. And that is the reason why I think like as Ray mentioned, we need to keep it like kind of like objective, so that don't start with something like too leading. For example, if you have some kind of like ideas in your mind, don't ask them like, is it a good one? Is that a kind of like leading problem, a leading question? Because it makes them think like, okay, that is probably like on the way to solve it. And then they start thinking on that kind of like line of thinking, and it's not a good one, right? So just try to ask objectively, not like kind of like general and abstract way, but don't lead with anything.
Yeah,
Hi,
and
Jane.
howdy y'all, and if I could, I couldn't resist. I had to jump in here too. Please hear what Evelyn just mentioned about asking if an idea is good. You are leading for a type of response specifically for yourself. Keep in mind something that Madusha said earlier. We're trying to solve the problems of the users, right? So don't necessarily try to lead them into answering and giving you the answer you want. Make it all about that user, because as you've heard, is if you forget about that user along the way, even if you build a fantastic solution, it may fail. In fact, it probably will. Awesome. With that, I know we are getting ready to jump into our breakout activities. I just want to again thank Aaron and Evelyn so much for walking us through that portion of it. We'll see y'all in a little bit in the breakout rooms, but for now, drop y'all at the back so I can jump into more about this form. So first of all, what we're going to do today here is we have 2 activities, but we want to make sure that y'all are able to be in the same group for both of these activities. So on screen, there's a QR code. Please go ahead and scan that and fill it out. It's just a couple questions. It should take you about 2 minutes. From there, I want you to go to the bit.ly link at the bottom of the screen and just wait for you to be given access to join the room. From there, we'll break up into our breakout rooms and we'll have a really good time with this breakout activity. So we're going to leave this on screen for just a minute, and then we are going to get ready to move to our breakout rooms. I know y'all are probably curious about a little bit more of the activity itself. So we'll bring the next slide up in just a second to kind of discuss a little bit more about what we're going to do here, okay? While we wait, we also have a question here. So will the groups in this activity be random? I'm in a group from my DSC. Can we be placed in the same room? It's a great question. Yeah, if you would like that, we can definitely make that a reality. I don't have a slot for that on the form, but if you could just put next to your name, like a specific number, so that way, like the number 1, so I can see all of y'all can be put in the same group, that'd be great. Okay, going to give it one more second here, and then we will move on to this next portion. And Evelyn, if you want to come up and explain some of this, I'm sure the students would love to hear from you. So with that, let's bring Evelyn back.
Hi, it's great to be back. Okay, so here's the first group activities, okay? So for first activities, we're gonna try to group you into a group of 4. Like Danny mentioned, you can just put a number next to your name in the form last time, and we're gonna put you into the same teams. But for others, we're gonna randomize because we want to, like get you some kind of like diverse perspective on the problem. And for our first activities, what we're going to do is we're going to try to set a goal, like a common goal between your team, and try to practice to understand the problem that you're trying to tackle. So it's going to be using this kind of link, or you can scan the QR code again. This is going to give you the access to our Google, kind of like a Drive folders, where it have 2 items in there. The first one is the Google Doc that should allows you to kind of like fill out in a template, kind of like question to guide you through how you can start working on your goal and your solution, how you can practice how might we things, and then come up with some possible solution that you can think of. And also, when you go into the breakout room, you're going to get assigned to a specific group number, right? And just remember that in this folder, we're going to be divided into like different teams. So check out the folders that align corresponding with your team breakout group numbers. And yeah, we're going to leave the scan code here for you to access it. And it's going to be like in 15 minutes for each of the team to work on this. So take your time, and we're gonna move to the breakout room soon.
Welcome back, everyone. So happy to see y'all. Hopefully, you made it back from our meet and you enjoyed our breakout activities. With that, I'm going to go back into the background and turn it back over to Evelyn and Aaron, and we'll get right back into it.
All right. Yes, I had a lot of like ideas that I heard from like amazing people in the group activities, and I really enjoyed our conversations. So I hope you all too. So let's help Li Yun go back on the stage for our second half of the workshop today. So hi Li Yun. Oh no, Li Yun is still in the Google Meet. Okay, that's fine.
Looks like we're having a little bit of technical issues there. As soon as we get him back online, we'll bring him up. So give us just 1 minute and we'll get that started.
In the meantime, if you have any question, just feel free to drop in the chat and we can take time to go through all of them. All right? All right. It seems like Lee Jun got into a very interesting conversations and he don't want to go back on the stage. So we will have Erin here to walk you through on our third phase of this design sprint, which is sketch. All right, Erin, here is your show.
All right, thank you, Evelyn. So before the break, we practiced how we can understand and define a problem in a better way, and already know how important it is to understand and define define and understand your problem. So let's see where we could go with sketching the problem. So what are we doing in sketching? Sketching is a concept to generate a broad range of ideas for your problem. The purpose of this phase is to encourage team members to conceptualize possible solutions for a defined problem in a short time. Of course, there are several methods to go about sketching these possible ideas. And one of these ideas that we encourage you all to do is the Crazy 8 method. The Crazy 8 method is going to refresh your mind and help you generate 8 ideas or solutions at the beginning of developing a feasible solution. By doing this, the team members can have a high chance to select a useful idea or solution in this phase. So let's check out how it works in the next slide. So for Crazy 8s, we're going to have to follow steps to come up with a variety of ideas. First, in a team, each member takes a piece of paper and folds it into 8 rectangles. So after that, one of the team members will set a timer for 8 minutes. The purpose of only having 8 minutes is that in this phase, we want to produce unpolished but innovative ideas rather than well-defined ideas that may come out within a longer period of time. I see we have a question here. I believe Leon is back, so or actually, can you answer this question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So question. Okay, does this mean that the sketch and the design method occur occurs as we are interviewing our end users? Well, yeah, I will say after we understand and define your problem already, we can start, we can start uh, thinking, we can start sketch, which means like generate different ideas from the results you all interviewed from end users.
Yeah, so I just want to add on what Li Yun said. So remember, right at the beginning of the workshop, we mentioned about like how this is gonna be like an iterative cycle. So it's just not like you just you just ask a question and then you sketch and then you got the ideas and you launch a project. It's not like that linear, right? It's more like, okay, you start asking the question first, you got something solid, and then you sketch and decide. And then after you test it out with the users you got, you have to go back at some point. It probably like just a sketch and design phase, but if it turns out to be like, like a totally different thing from what user needs, you probably have to go back further, even to the phase where you start questioning your end user, right? Because you want to ensure that the final thing after you take out this whole design process is something actually works for your users. So yeah. Oh, for example, if do we draw what user in terms of requirement? Yeah. So that's definitely what I was just mentioned about. So it's just kind of like think about it's more like a cycle where you keep having feedback and design and get feedback and design. That's it.
Yeah, so I'd actually like to add one way you can actually do this is through something that's called a low fidelity prototype, which is where you just have a piece of paper and a pencil, like what the Crazy Eight's trying to do. And after you get feedback from the users, you present them, possibly the prototype, and see how they interact with this prototype and see, okay, what needs to be improved and how smooth it is it for the user to interact with your prototype.
Yeah, and also like just remember like the main purpose of this Crazy Eight thing, why it's such a short term, is that it wants you to, kind of flush out all the ideas you got in your mind, right? You may have different like several ways to solve this problem, but you don't know like which ideas you got the best. So one thing to do it is to make it concrete on a paper. So just draw it out, flush all the ideas you got in your mind. And then you want to see like, okay, which one has which pros and cons, and you can compare it together, right? So don't limit yourself anything in this phase. Just sketch it out. It doesn't need to be something like very fancy, very colorful, and just like Erin mentioned, just a low fidelity prototype. It's just some draw and sketch. It doesn't need to be like high quality or something. Just enough to translate and kind of like describe what you are going on. Yes, like what you are seeing on the screen. Just that's it. Doesn't need to be beautiful. Doesn't need to be like a high-end thing, like the most innovative thing. Just flush out whatever you got. All right. So should conclude for our sketching phase. We're gonna go back on it in the activity 2, but then. Okay, what do you decide which direction, which solution worth putting effort into to maximize your impact, right? So you want to, because you only have like 2 months for this project, you want to optimize your effort. You don't want to spend whole effort to do everything. You just pick out like the best thing that you think would make the most impact out of everything, and pursue them. And decision metrics is one way to do it. So what decision metrics is? The decision metric is the system where you score your ideas on 2 criteria. The first one is the user value and effort. Oh, sorry. The first one is the user value. So how much your solution helps your users out. So remember, like when you talk about like you want to interview your end users, what do they need? This is kind of the thing that you want to focus on, right? What kind of the values, the benefits that your solution can offer to them? Is it like a lot, like can it like change the current situations a lot, or just make a very, very minimal change that doesn't matter at all, right? The second one is about the effort that you just spend on these solutions. So in terms of effort, it's just not like your time or something like that. It could be like anything ranging from like technical difficulties, right? Because probably your team probably not it like kind of like fluent in your team probably not professional or expert in all kind of technologies, but you willing to pick up some new skill. That's why we are here, to help you to learn new skill. Or you want to, like experiment with some kind of like technology you haven't like been familiar before. So that also consider like kind of like technical difficulties for your team, the kind of like effort and times you have to spend on it. So think about like how willing you want to go for it, and what time and budget and kind of like what your team can do within this restricted time and schedule that you have for these competitions. So that is on the y-axis. Okay, so and map out everything on a two-dimensional space. Two-dimensional space. So in the horizontal one is user values. The more users go more to the right, right? And on the vertical axis, it's going to be the level of difficulties, the level of effort you have to put in there. And once you got all of your ideas in this two-dimensional plane, you want to start prioritizing everything on the right of the plane, which offer the most value for your users. You don't want to spend a lot of time for something very minimal impact, right? You want something that can offer the most impact compared to each other. And then after that, you start deciding based on your team needs and constraint, because it's vary from team to teams, right? How willing your teams want to put effort and time into this solution. What can you do with it? That is when you start picking out like the idea from the right half of the decision matrix. All right, Erin. Yes, don't let your team expose like that after like working through like 2 months of the solution, and then turns out it offers zero value for the users. That's the response you may have from your team. And yeah, Erin and Li Yun, do you want to add something on this?
Actually, no. No, but actually, I do have a question for you, Evelyn. So, so you were mentioning about we. So in this phase, we have to we have to choose the criteria, right, to be able to evaluate all the ideas in phase 3, right? So I do have a question, like how can we, is there a way to be able to choose the criteria systematically, or do you have any suggestion for for people who don't have a lot of experience for that?
So just to paraphrase a bit to make sure they understand the question correctly. So it's
Okay,
more
yeah.
of like, how can you like make the comparison objectively, right? Because like it's very kind of like subjective for each people to see like how this kind of like solution can offer the values and how much effort is very different from like each of the person. Yes, I totally get it. It's actually like one of the challenge for this one, right? Because like we all feel differently. Like if one of our team member offers a solution, they're gonna think it's the best and it's gonna bring like the most value. So how can you actually like know if it is, right? So one of the things that I think one of our participant has mentioned in the chat that we did like answer his question is that how is it user interview plays in here, right? You want to actually relies on the user feedback to see what kind of like priority, what kind of values that they were looking for. That is how you can, like kind of prioritize and scale your user values, because you don't actually know what they need. You need to depend on their response to do that. And that is like one of the best way for you to try to objectively kind of like evaluating this, right? And also like one of the things we can do that we already mentioned in our first workshop is to always note down your hypothesis, your assumptions, and validate it, right? So probably you don't have enough input to know like if your users actually need it, with some kind of like new ideas that you actually like come up with in the moment, and you don't actually have the input for this moment to kind of like know if they actually need it. So just note it down and then give some kind of like relative measures on the board. Probably just keep it like Erin mentioned, just don't get rid of all the insignificant one. Just keep it on the side. And when you come to kind of like prototyping and testing with users, bring that idea on, ask them, test on it to see if it actually like fit into what you were looking for. Is that the thing that your assumptions was correct? Is there anything that you want to review when you go back to this later on? That is the kind of thing. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
So if anyone have any more questions, just drop it in the chat. And I think Danny probably want to go back a bit. Oh, does it mean we should work with a small amount of user to get quick feedback? Yes. So one of the quick tips we can do is that you can have interview like 5%, right? Get some info from them. And then, okay, you can list out what are the things that you think those kind of people have in their mind about what the user you want needs and what you can tackle on. Ideate on that. Make some kind of like decision metrics to brainstorming out, decide which kind of like idea you probably want to pursue, and then note down all of the things that you believe at that point is helpful or not helpful, which one you think could be like make more impact or less impact, and then go back some kind of like user interviewed again, and then just don't lead with this. That is mentioned, try to stay objective. So just try to tackle it from, I would say, high level way of phrasing questions. So more like if you having a kind of like, let's say some kind of like question, not really. So if you have some idea to tackle a very specific small group, so I would say I would bring up like an example of the group 2 when we was in the discussion. So for example, like in group 2, we talk about like how you can tackle and help with like mental health issues. And one of the specific aspect of it is about the financing, right? That is a very small thing that comes up during the discussion. So you probably don't have any input on it at the beginning. So what you can do is that note down some of your assumptions when you brainstorming and making the decisions of the idea. Try to sketch it out and then make a prototype out of it, and then bring that prototype back to get some more feedback and just to kind of like looking for more information on that side. And then if some kind of thing that is not actually aligned with your kind of like assumptions, you can go back and get rid of all the things that you find not helpful. Does it help, Jasmine?
One thing I'd also like to add about your question, though. So after you do survey your population for around your community, you could always put in another question, like saying, "Would you like to be interviewed, or would you like to, come in and answer a little more questions that you can prepare?" And then after that, after you make your prototype based off of your survey responses, you should create your prototype and then have the people who answered yes to the interview, possibly with some incentive to interview, to come in and test it and see like how they interact with your prototype. And also make sure to get a diverse amount of people. Like say we have different age groups for your users or for your testing users, and have different backgrounds too for your users, so that each background or each person may have a different experience in using your prototype. And after that, you could make improvements to your prototype after their feedback.
I think we have like another like question on like should the users survey population? Yes, thank you, Danny, for bringing it back. I thought the survey population should match the end users. If you could elaborate on that in the chat, that would be great. By like survey population, you mean like the number, like matching is like matching in like the numbers, the size, or matching in like the characteristic? Because like it was a little bit confusing in here, but I would assume if you say about like number, I say, then just like 5 is just like a kind of like example number, right? So you can try to get at most people that fit into the profile we could dive to this like in our next workshop, but try to find like the most people that belong to the group, that who is like your stakeholder if you join our first workshop, but if you're not, like who play in this, who benefit from this solution, who be affected by this solution, right? Try to interview them as most as possible. The larger the sample size you got, the better the surveys is. But in the kind of like testing and reviewing and feedback, it doesn't need to be like as much as possible, because like you probably don't have that much resource, right? You can try to go for the number in here to get the most like objective and balanced response as possible, but it's not always the case you can reach like 1,000 people or 2,000 people. So that is a thing. But if you was talking about like kind of like matching in characteristic, yes, that is exactly true. Don't go for like your parents or your neighbor if they don't actually fit into the profile of who you were tagging on, right? Because their ideas is probably very different from whoever is your end user are. So try to find the people who actually directly, or at least very close but in the indirectly way, involved in this matter. Erin, do you want to add something?
Well, I think we are running a little short on time, so we should go on to the group activity now.
All right. So yeah, just feel free to drop the question or you feel something in the chat and we can go back with it after our second activities. So let's move on to our second activities. So for our second activities, you're going to have 20 minutes to sketch with your teams in the Google Jam in your folders. And then we're going to start like using the sticky note in there to kind of like put that ideas on this decision matrix and make the decisions on it. So let's go back to the Google Meet and go open your drive again. All right. See you on the other end. All right. Thank you all for engaging in such thoughtful discussion about ideas and sketching out. That was a wonderful experience. Do you agree with me, Erin and Liyun?
Yeah, a lot of wonderful ideas, a lot of things coming through.
Totally.
Okay.
I did love that, all like these two group activities. Basically, got a lot of ideas, cool ideas. And yeah.
All right, so let's wrap this up. So, just some more resource for you all to look out for when building your solutions. So, we still have the front end design series offered by our dear chapters, University of Central Florida, on every Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So, check out the link on the flyers. You can totally go back to this after the event because this session is being recorded. So, make sure to check it out. And I believe that we got the swag opportunities weekly here again. So for this week, this is a link that you need to go to, just some kind of like feedback and sharing about your experience. This week, UTD challenged you to host the brainstorming sessions with your own team at your chapters. And then you can just share your opinions on that and what kind of feedback you got for us on this series so we can improve it in our next weeks. So make sure to check it out. All right. And I think that Danny probably want to go up and let us know about what is the swag that people got for this week challenge.
Yeah, so thank you so much. What we're going to do here today is we're going to raffle off a Google Developer Student Club backpack and a water bottle, which will be accompanying that. So what we're going to do here is for all of those who participated in our activity last week, we're going to do a Name of Wheels raffle today live on this stream. If you are the winner, I will reach out to you to get this backpack shipped. And what I want to encourage all of our viewers and maybe people who are watching after this, pay attention to this next challenge. It might be an opportunity for you to win some awesome Developer Student Club swag. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the Name of Wheels. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get this spin going. Who's going to be the winner? All right, so it looks like our winner is going to be for the nickname Has Not. So thank you so much for participating in this breakout activity, all of y'all. I will be reaching out to get your shipping information and make sure that we get you your awesome Developer Student Club swag ASAP. Again, thank you for participating. Participate in the next challenge for another chance to win.
All right. Thank you all for coming today. And if you have any questions, drop it now in the chat right now. We are happy to follow up and just check out with your chapters. All right. See you next week.
Thank you again so much for joining. We'll see you at the next event.